Weeks turned into months. Seasons shifted. And slowly the street changed. Lawns grew a little wilder. Fences got painted in colors the HOA would have banned. Bright reds, soft blues, deep greens. And people started helping each other again. Mrs. Hargrove planted flowers by her mailbox. The bakers repainted their porch. Together this time, laughing. And every weekend, someone stopped by my place to sit on the porch and talk. It wasn't a community ruled by fear anymore. It was a neighborhood stitched back together by choice. One evening, a small boy, maybe 8 years old, came up to my porch. He held a sketchbook in his hands. "Mr. Cole," he said shyly, "can I show you something?" He opened the book. Inside was a drawing, my house perfectly detailed, the windows glowing like it was alive. Beneath it he'd written in big block letters, "The house that said no." I stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then I smiled and ruffled his hair. "That's a good title, kid. You should keep that one." He grinned, nodded, and ran off into the twilight. That night I sat alone on the porch again, the same spot where all of this had begun. The moonlight brushed over the yard, silver and soft. The air smelled of cedar and grass. I took a deep breath and whispered, "We did it, old friend." The wind rustled through the oak trees, almost like the house whispered back. For the first time in decades, this place wasn't just a memory. It wasn't a battleground. It wasn't a target. It was home. And as I looked at the glow from the rebuilt porch light, I realized something simple and true. You don't need permission to belong. You just need the courage to stand your ground and rebuild what's yours, no matter who tries to take it. The courtroom wore. The courthouse smelled like old wood and nerves. Polished floors, tall ceilings, and that quiet tension that always hangs in the air before something big happens. I'd been here before, as an architect renewing permits, signing contracts, but never like this. This time I wasn't building anything. I was tearing something down. The Lakeside Homeowners Association versus Ethan Cole hearing was the talk of the town. Half the seats were filled with curious locals. The other half with HOA members wearing matching blazers like they were soldiers in a suburban army. At the front, Diane Keller sat stiff and perfect, eyes forward, lips tight. She didn't look at me once, but she didn't have to. I could feel her anger across the room, cold, silent, controlled. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The gavel cracked once, echoing through the room like thunder. "Let's proceed," Judge Morton said, adjusting his glasses. The HOA's lawyer, a smug man in a grey suit, stood first. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is a simple matter of community compliance. Mr. Cole's property, while originally outside Lakeside's limits, now falls under the association's expanded jurisdiction. He has repeatedly refused to follow regulations, pay dues, or seek design approval." He turned toward me with a confident smirk. "We're simply asking for compliance and damages." My lawyer, Daniel Reeves, stood up slowly, his tone calm but sharp. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, "the only thing simple here is the truth, and the truth is, the Lakeside HOA has fabricated maps, forged documents, and harassed my client for months in an attempt to illegally absorb his property." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Morton frowned. "You're alleging forgery?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor, and we can prove it." He motioned to me. I rose and walked to the stand. As I sat, I could feel the stares of every HOA member behind me, like daggers in the back. "Mr. Cole," Daniel said, "please describe the first incident." I took a slow breath. The day after I started renovations, I received a letter claiming I owed HOA fees. Then came fake fines, forged cease-work orders, trespassing, property damage, even theft. All of it under the pretense that my home was within HOA boundaries. Daniel nodded. "And did you verify whether that claim was true?" I opened the folder in front of me, pulling out certified documents. "I did. I obtained county zoning maps and property records. My home, 17 Maple Drive, has never been, not once, under Lakeside's jurisdiction." He held the papers up. "These are certified by the county clerk, Your Honor." The judge leaned forward, examining the seal. "Duly noted." Diane shifted in her chair. Then came the part I'd been waiting for. Daniel pulled out another sheet. Glossy stills printed from my security cameras. Mr. Cole, can you identify these individuals? I looked at the photo. 2 people in neon vests, taking pictures of my yard in the middle of the night. Yes, I said clearly. That's Mark Fuller, HOA Vice President, and Lisa Brown, the Community Compliance Officer. The courtroom gasped. Daniel turned toward the judge. Your Honor, these individuals were caught trespassing at 2:17 a.m., delivering false notices under forged letterhead. We've also submitted a police report verifying this incident. Judge Morton raised an eyebrow. Forged notices? Daniel smiled slightly. Indeed. We compared their paperwork to authentic city documents. The headers don't match. The city has confirmed that no such orders were ever issued. The HOA's lawyer tried to interject. Your Honor, this is... Sit down, the judge snapped. I'd like to hear how the HOA justifies this. Diane finally stood. Her composure cracked just enough to reveal the fury beneath. These are fabricated claims, she said, voice trembling. Our documents are valid. Lakeside's expansion plan was approved internally. Internally? Daniel repeated. You mean without city authorization? That's not... She started, but Daniel was ready. He placed another document on the table, the HOA's supposed new map, Your Honor. This map has no zoning approval, no signature from the county, and conveniently includes Mr. Cole's property for the first time in 40 years. That's not an update. That's a land grab. The judge examined both maps, mine and theirs, side by side. Then he looked directly at Diane. Mrs. Keller, did you personally authorize this map? She hesitated. As HOA president, yes or no? The judge pressed. Her silence was answer enough. By the afternoon recess, the courtroom had changed. People who once looked at me like a troublemaker now whispered in disbelief about Diane. Even the local reporter from Channel 7 was there, scribbling furiously. When we returned after lunch, Daniel made it simple, Your Honor, he said. This case isn't about community rules. It's about control. It's about a group that forgot homeowners have rights. My client didn't buy a house. He bought back his freedom. And the defendants tried to take that from him with lies. The HOA lawyer stammered something about miscommunication, but it was too late. Judge Morton's verdict came down like a hammer. The court finds in favor of Mr. Cole. The HOA's expansion is null and void. Furthermore, the plaintiff's counterclaim for harassment and trespassing is sustained. Damages to be determined. I exhaled for the first time in hours. It was over. Diane stood pale and speechless. The same woman who once stood on my driveway threatening me with fake power now looked like she couldn't find the ground beneath her feet. The HOA board members whispered nervously, already distancing themselves from her. Outside, reporters swarmed me as I stepped down the courthouse steps. Mr. Cole, how does it feel to win against the HOA? When asked, I smiled slightly. Feels good to remind people. You don't have to live under fear to have community. That night, I returned to my porch. The house was quiet, calm, like it knew the storm had passed. The porch light glowed softly, illuminating the rebuilt fence, the new windows, the same gravel driveway where it all began. For the first time, there were no letters taped to my door, no tire marks in the yard, no eyes watching from behind the blinds. Just peace. I ran my hand along the wooden railing, whispering, "We did it. You're free again." And in that silence, for the first time in years, my home felt like home. The Home Reborn. A month after the verdict, the neighborhood was quieter. Not peaceful yet, just quieter, the way a battlefield feels after the smoke clears, but before the grass grows back. The Lakeside HOA was still there in name, but its empire had crumbled. Half the board resigned. The rest stayed silent, pretending nothing had happened. And Diane Keller? She sold her house and left town. No farewell, no apology, just gone. Like a storm that finally runs out of thunder. The first morning after she left, I woke up before sunrise. The air was cool. The sky painted that pale pink that only happens before the day wakes up. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, staring at the horizon. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. No letters taped to my door, no cameras clicking from across the street. Just wind, trees, and the quiet creak of the porch boards beneath my feet. The house, my house, was alive again. Every nail, every wall, every scratch on the old wooden floors felt like a story breathing again. I walked through each room, touching the walls I'd rebuilt, smelling the faint mix of paint and cedar. It wasn't perfect, old houses never are, but that's what made it real. A week later, I decided to throw an open house, not for sale, for community. I sent out small handwritten notes. No HOA, no rules, just good people, good coffee, and a story worth sharing. Saturday at 5 p.m., 17 Maple Drive. When the evening came, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few curious faces. But by sunset, a dozen neighbors stood outside, people who had once avoided me, now standing with pie plates, folding chairs, and cautious smiles. Mrs. Hargrove was there too, leaning on her cane, her sharp eyes soft for the first time. "You did it," she said. "You made them remember what this place used to be." I smiled. "No, we did. You just gave me the courage to start," she chuckled. "Don't give me that credit, son. You were the hammer. I was just the echo." As night fell, lights flickered on across the yard, not the cold uniform glow of HOA-approved lamps, but warm, mismatched bulbs hanging from trees. Children ran barefoot through the grass. Someone played a guitar. Laughter replaced the silence that had haunted this street for years. For the first time, Lakeside felt like a real neighborhood, not a rule book. Later that night, when everyone had left, I walked to the backyard. Fireflies danced between the trees, and the old tool shed, once broken into, now stood strong, painted deep blue with gold trim. I'd rebuilt it as a community art space, just like I'd promised myself. A place for kids to draw, paint, build, anything that reminded them that creation was always stronger than control. Above the doorway, I'd carved a small wooden sign. "Freedom built this." "They're not taking this from me again." I started digging, literally and figuratively. I pulled old county maps, boundary documents, and property deeds from archives. I found proof that my home had never, not once, been part of any HOA zoning plan. The borders were legally locked decades ago. What Diane was doing wasn't just intimidation, it was fraud. The more I found, the angrier I got. But I didn't let it show, not yet. Instead, I fixed what they broke. I cleaned what they vandalized. I rebuilt what they tried to ruin. And when the next letter came, a fine for non-approved vehicle parking, I smiled. Because now I had more than just anger. I had evidence. That night, as rain started tapping against the windows, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the cameras flicker in the dark. Across the street, Diane's house glowed like a watchtower, her silhouette pacing behind the curtains. "Keep watching," I whispered. "I want you to see what happens next." The storm grew louder, lightning flashing across the sky, like the world itself was charging up for what was coming. Because this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing up to the kind of people who think they can own others. Peace. And by the time I was done, everyone in Lakeside would learn exactly what happens when you try to bully the wrong man. The counterattack. The morning after the theft, something inside me shifted. Fear turned into focus. They'd pushed too far, and I was done playing defense. I spent that day doing what I do best, planning. Because if they wanted a war of paper, procedure, and intimidation, I was going to beat them at their own game. I started with the records office. The building smelled like old dust and bureaucracy. A clerk named Jenna helped me dig through county archives, yellowed maps, zoning charts, and scanned documents from before half this neighborhood even existed. After an hour of searching, there it was, an old map dated 1986, with my property clearly marked outside the lakeside boundary. It was stamped and sealed by the city. I took photos of everything, every page, every signature, every coordinate. Then I requested certified copies. They'd have to match those against the fake expansion maps the HOA claimed were approved. And when they didn't, their lives would collapse. That was step one. Step two was information. I set up a small workstation in my living room. Laptop, documents, security footage. Every night after work, I'd go through hours of footage. That's when I caught them. At 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday, two figures crept into my yard. One held a flashlight, the other a clipboard. They took photos, measured fences, and left a folded paper taped to my porch. Another notice of violation. I paused the footage, zoomed in, and saw their faces clearly. Both were HOA board members, caught in 4K. The next morning I printed the stills and added them to my evidence folder. If Diane wanted to play legal games, she'd better bring her best lawyer. A few days later, I attended the public HOA board meeting. They didn't expect me to show up. The room was small, a community center painted beige and filled with folding chairs. At the front, Diane and her board sat behind a table, smiling like politicians on parade. When I walked in, the chatter stopped. "Ah, Mr. Cole," Diane said, feigning surprise. "We didn't see your name on the attendance list." "I figured I didn't need permission," I replied, taking a seat in the front row. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing lawn height regulations and pool maintenance. Boring until Diane said, "Next item, property integration review for 17 Maple Drive." That was my address. I stood up before she could continue. "Before you waste more ink, you might want to see this." I placed a folder on the table. Inside were the certified maps, timestamps, and surveillance photos. Diane hesitated, scanning the documents. Her face stiffened as she recognized the county seals. "These are outdated," she said quickly. "No," I replied. "They're the latest certified copies from the county zoning office. They prove you've been sending illegal notices and trespassing on private property." A murmur spread across the room. One of the board members whispered, "Is this true?" Diane ignored him. "Mr. Cole, you're creating unnecessary conflict." "Conflict?" I interrupted. "You forged a government document, harassed me, and vandalized my property. I've filed police reports. Keep pushing, and the next call I make is to the state attorney." Silence. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I turned and looked at the rest of the homeowners watching, tired faces, nervous, afraid. "You all think you're safe?" I said to them, "They'll come for you next. She wants every house under her thumb." And then I walked out, calm, deliberate, unshaken. That night Diane came to my house again. No clipboard this time, just anger. "You think you're clever," she hissed, stepping closer to my porch. I stayed still, my hand resting casually on the rail. The porch light above us hummed softly, casting her shadow long and warped across the steps. "I don't think," I said quietly. "I know," her jaw tightened. "You don't understand how things work here. We are the community. You either belong or you don't." "I don't," I said, smiling slightly. "And that's the problem for you, isn't it?" She glared at me for a long moment before stepping back. "You'll regret this," she said again, but this time it sounded less like a threat and more like fear. When she left, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days, because finally the tide was turning. The next morning, I contacted local media. Small-town papers love a good underdog story, especially when it involves HOA corruption. By that afternoon, a journalist named Tina Morales showed up at my porch with a camera and notepad. "You're the guy fighting the Lakeside HOA?" she asked. I nodded. "You could say that." She interviewed me for an hour. The letters, the fake fines, the trespassing, the stolen tools, the forged city notice. I showed her everything. A week later, the headline dropped, "Homeowner exposes HOA overreach, illegal expansion and forgery allegations." It spread fast. Comments flooded in. People shared their own HOA horror stories, and for the first time, the power balance shifted. Diane wasn't just fighting me now. She was fighting the spotlight, but I wasn't done yet. That night, I gathered all my evidence, the certified maps, the security footage, the police reports, and walked them down to my lawyer. Mrs. Hargrove had given me his name, Daniel Reeves, a retired HOA litigation expert. He flipped through the folder, then looked up at me and grinned. "Mr. Cole," he said, "you've got them cornered. Let's file." The lawsuit went out 2 days later. Ethan Cole versus Lakeside Homeowners Association. Harassment, trespassing, forgery, and attempted property fraud. For years, they'd bullied everyone into silence. But this time, the record would speak. That night, I sat on my porch again. The air was cool still, alive with quiet victory. The house behind me, old, creaky, beautiful, seemed to hum with pride. I whispered, they wanted control. They're about to get consequences. And as the streetlights flickered on, I could almost feel the neighborhood holding its breath again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was change. The return. The road that led to my old home hadn't changed much. Same oak trees lined the cracked pavement, their roots lifting the road like they were trying to escape it. The same wind carried that dry, dusty scent of the valley. But when I turned the corner and saw the house, my chest tightened. It was still there, standing crooked like an old man too proud to fall. The white paint was long gone, replaced by grey patches of mold and chipped wood. The porch sagged, the windows were boarded up, and weeds grew taller than the mailbox. It looked abandoned, forgotten. But to me, it looked like a memory I could still save. I parked and sat there for a while, staring. I'd left this place when I was 16, after my parents lost the house in a foreclosure. The HOA had taken control of the neighboring development soon after, promising modern community standards. They tore down old homes, built copy-paste mansions, and banned everything that didn't match their vision. But my house had always been outside their border. Technically, it was just far enough to stay free. That's why I came back. I got out of the truck, crunching gravel under my boots. Every sound felt too loud in the silence. A faded "for sale" sign hung half-fallen at the end of the driveway. I brushed off the dirt and saw the realtor's number, barely visible. Within the hour, I was on the phone. 2 weeks later, it was mine. The day I got the keys, I stood in the living room, surrounded by dust and cobwebs. The floorboards creaked under my weight. The air smelled of decay, and sunlight slipped through broken shutters in thin, trembling lines. "This is where it started," I said softly. "Let's bring it back." Renovation was in my blood. I was an architect now, one who built towers in cities that forgot their history. But this house wasn't about profit. It was about roots, about something no HOA or committee could dictate. I started small, cleared out debris, replaced windows, reconnected power. I worked until my hands bled, and I didn't care. Each swing of the hammer felt like reclaiming something stolen from time. By week 3, neighbors began to notice. Most were friendly at first. Polite waves, curious smiles. But some just stared, especially the ones who lived across the street, in identical beige houses with perfect lawns and the same flags. Fluttering from each porch, it didn't take long before I got my first visitor. A silver SUV pulled into my driveway one morning while I was repainting the fence. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, sharp suit, clipboard in hand, and that unmistakable look of someone who owned the air around her. "Good morning," she said crisply. "I'm Diane Keller, president of the Lakeside Homeowners Association." I nodded slowly. "Good morning. I'm not part of Lakeside." She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Technically, not yet. But we've recently expanded the community boundaries to include all homes along this street. That means your property is now within our jurisdiction." "Funny," I said, "because the county property map says otherwise." Her smile twitched. "We're in the process of updating that. In the meantime, I'd advise you to familiarize yourself with our community guidelines. For instance," she glanced at my half-painted fence, "that color wouldn't be approved. We prefer neutral tones." I set the paintbrush down and stepped closer. "Ma'am, this house has stood here for 60 years. It doesn't need your approval." Her expression hardened. "I see. Well, I'll make sure to note that in the compliance report." And just like that, she got back in her SUV and drove off, leaving tire marks on my gravel like a signature. That night, I found an envelope taped to my door. Notice of violation, unapproved renovation activity. It demanded a $250 fine. I laughed, an angry, disbelieving kind of laugh. Then I noticed something else. Someone had walked through my side yard. Fresh footprints in the mud. They'd trespassed to take pictures. Over the next week, more letters arrived. Failure to maintain approved landscaping. Unauthorized exterior paint. Noise complaint due to construction. All from an HOA I wasn't part of. Neighbors began to whisper. One man mowing his lawn next door leaned over the fence and muttered, "They won't stop, you know. Diane's got a thing about control. She's tried this before," I stared at him. "Then she's about to find out this house isn't for sale. And neither am I," he gave a slow nod. "You'll need more than paint to fight her." That night, I stood on the porch watching the streetlights flicker. The house behind me groaned in the wind, but it felt alive again, like it remembered who it belonged to. They wanted to drag it into their perfect plastic world, strip it of history, rules, and individuality. But I wasn't some scared homeowner who'd roll over for a fine. I looked at the envelope in my hand and whispered, "You picked the wrong house." The porch light buzzed faintly above me as thunder rolled in the distance. And that was the night the battle for my childhood home truly began. The harassment begins. The first week after Diane's visit felt like living under surveillance. Every morning when I stepped out to work on the porch, I could feel eyes watching me. Blinds shifting, curtains fluttering, silhouettes freezing mid-movement. Even the sound of my hammer seemed to echo louder than usual, like the neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for me to break one of their invisible rules. I'd bought freedom, but what I got was a war zone wrapped in polite smiles. It started small, a letter here, a complaint there. But soon they came in waves. Each envelope carried the same polished logo, Lakeside Homeowners Association. Each one accused me of something new. Unauthorized driveway alteration. Failure to maintain grass height under 6 inches. Unregistered exterior color scheme. It was absurd. My property wasn't part of their district. I checked the county zoning maps myself. It stopped exactly 2 lots before mine. But that didn't matter to Diane and her committee of clipboard crusaders. One morning, I caught a man in a neon vest standing in my yard taking photos of my garden. When I shouted, he scurried back to his car like a cockroach caught under a light. That same evening, I installed cameras. Motion sensing, high resolution, full coverage. If they wanted a fight, I'd make sure every second of it was recorded. A few days later, I met Mrs. Hargrove, the neighbor 2 houses down. She was in her 70s, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan and the kind of eyes that had seen too many battles. "You're the one who bought the old coal place," she said, leaning on her cane. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Trying to bring it back to life," she smiled faintly. "It's good someone finally is. They've been circling that house for years, waiting for someone naive enough to move in." "Circling?" I asked. She nodded. "The HOA. Diane's obsessed with owning every property on this street. Last year, she strong-armed the Bakers into signing after threatening to cut off community access. It's all intimidation, but it works. Most people don't have the stomach for a legal fight." I frowned. "Lucky for me, I'm not most people." She chuckled softly. "Then be careful." They played dirty. She wasn't wrong. Within days, someone flattened my mailbox. A week later, my garbage cans went missing. Then the electricity flickered out for hours without explanation. Coincidence? Maybe once. But not this many times. I kept fixing everything, documenting every incident, keeping every letter. I created a folder labeled Evidence HOA Harassment. It was getting thicker by the day. Then came the Cease Work notice. It arrived pinned to my front door in red print, bold and official-looking, as if from the city itself. Effective immediately. All construction, renovation, and landscaping activities must cease pending HOA compliance review. My stomach tightened. It looked real, but something felt off. The header didn't match county documents I'd seen before. So I made a call. The city office confirmed it. "Mr. Cole, we have no such notice on file." "That's not from us. Looks like someone forged it." I felt my pulse spike. Forged official documents. That was a criminal offense that night. I filed a police report. The next morning, Diane was waiting on my driveway. "Good morning," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I heard there's been some confusion. I held up the fake notice. You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you? She gave a practiced laugh. Oh, that? Must have been a clerical error. These things happen. I stepped closer. You forged a city document to stop me from fixing my house. Careful with your words, Mr. Cole, she said, her tone sharpening. You're not making many friends here. I stared her down. Good thing I'm not looking for any. She smiled, slow, tight, venomous. You'll regret this. And then she walked away, heels clicking like gunshots on concrete. That evening, I found tire tracks leading into my backyard. Someone had driven up behind the house, right where my tool shed was. The door hung open. Inside, my power tools were gone. That was the moment something in me snapped. I stood in the middle of that yard, surrounded by the ghosts of what this place used to be, and swore out loud.